Hello and welcome to the WriteHive 2022 panel titled Depiction Matters, Female Characters in Science Fiction and Fantasy. My name is Stefanie Contreras and I'll be the panelist keeping us on track today. So please drop any questions you may have in the chat and we will make sure to answer them as we go. But before we get started, let's introduce our panel. As I said, my name is Stefanie. I am a Latinx author, a geek girl. I have a Pop Culture Junkies podcast, and I'm an officer with Geek Girl Brunch. And I also volunteer with WriteHive. I was born and raised in Phoenix and graduated with an MS in Communications from the University of Oregon and a BS in Journalism and Advertising from Northern Arizona University. I self-published my sci-fi trilogy titled The Merry Maids on Amazon, and am now working on a superhero origin story featuring female Latinx superheroes. Next, Chelsea, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I mean, it's not going to be as amazing as yours, but I will do what I can. Hello, everyone. My name is Chelsea, and I go by CM Lockhart on the internet. I am the owner of Written in Melanin LLC, which is a company that was created to support Black authors. And I'm also the founder of the Melanin Library, an online database to find books by Black authors. So if you're looking to diversify your bookshelf, you can always check out melaninlibrary.com. And what else? I'm an author. That's why I'm here. I have written one romance, and my current book, this one right here, We Are the Origin, is coming out June 21st. And I write fantasy about Black girls who aren't all that nice. So that's what this book is. It is the first in a 2-part duology that I have planned and a bunch of other ideas that I plan to write. So glad to be here.
Yay, thank you. I love it. Holly, how about you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Holly Ash. I am a science fiction author. I have 5 books currently published, 4 in an underwater sci-fi military story called The Journey Missions that follows 2 female-led combat teams as they try to maintain peace on the planet that the story takes place on. And then I also have a sci-fi suspense novel called Cleansing Rain. That one deals with conspiracy theories and eco-terrorism, set in present-day Detroit, Michigan. And the sequel to that one will be out in September. When I'm not writing, I work as an environmental engineer in the automotive manufacturing space. And I am a wife and have 2 kids, a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old that hopefully don't come bursting in the room while we're recording this. But you never know what's going to happen, so.
Thank you, Holly. And Samantha.
Hi, I am Samantha Bryant. I live in North Carolina. I'm originally from Kentucky, and I left my heart in Alaska. I am best known as the author of the menopausal superhero series that you see behind me on the wall. Currently, it is 4 novels, 2 novellas, and a collection of shorts. And the 5th novel is what I'm working on right now. And tell you what, writing a series ender is not an easy gig. For my day job, I teach middle school Spanish. So it's probably not a surprise that besides superhero, I also write horror. One of my taglines for me is Samantha Bryant, half hero, half horror, which is also a description of my day job. And this is Pumpkin, who decided he needed to be a part of things.
Hi, Pumpkin.
Oh, so cute.
Everybody's going to want to talk to Pumpkin now. Awesome. So why don't we go ahead and jump into our questions for today, starting with, why is it important to see good female representation in science fiction and fantasy? I don't know about you all, but when I was little, I loved to play pretend that I was Luke Skywalker in the trash compactor fighting a monster. I really wanted to be Atreyu, like discovering Falkor or meeting the Rockbiter. Like those were the people that I was looking at. And they were not female, right? I definitely was obsessed with any female that I saw that was what I would call a badass, like Red Sonja or She-Ra or maybe Sarah Connor in T2, right? I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but not a single one of them was brown, which is maybe a different panel, but they were females and they were in those roles that I really aspired to be. So when you think like, what is it important? Why is it important to see good female representation in science fiction fantasy? I feel like for me, the answer is it's because it shows us that we can aspire to be in worlds that are not hindered by any modern social constructs. Like we can be badass too. And that's why I see it. But how about for you, Samantha? Like, what would you say?
Well, I definitely, I work with young people in my day job. I'm a middle school teacher, and especially for young people, it's so important to see representations of people like you, however we're defining like you today, that do a range of things, that are not always just the funny sidekick, or not always just somebody's servant or something like that, right? You need to see a good variety, because our fiction and the stories we are told feed our visions of what we can be. If you never see anybody like you doing a thing, that takes a tremendous act of courage, imagination, and force of will to then imagine yourself in that role, never having seen anything like that. And some people have it. Some people can overcome, and they can go be the first one of those, first woman astronaut, the first of anything. But that's not most people. Most people need help. They need to have seen themselves represented in narratives so that they can imagine themselves in those roles and then eventually pursue them. And we do a great disservice to young people if we try to suggest that your external characteristics decide anything about what you can do with your life.
Well said. Thank you. Yeah. Chelsea, how about for you?
I kind of agree with what both of you have said, in that it's really important to see yourself, because a lot of times, at least when I was growing up, kind of like you said, the main character wasn't Black or brown. So like you said, that's a different conversation. But also, even when there was a female character, a lot of times she was just the sidekick or the love interest, or the one who was like there for the adventure, but the story wasn't really about her, and she wasn't the one who had a whole lot of growth. She was just there to like look pretty and be cute and to offer a little bit of relief in the story, or to be the supportive one, like, oh, come on, you got this, and to like give the pep talk, and in a lot of ways kind of be like a mom figure, if that makes sense, to like take care of the protagonist who is actually doing the work. And it was just like one of those things where, like you said, Samantha, like seeing yourself beyond being in that role, it's just like, no, you can be the main character, because in real life, like everyone's the protagonist of their own story. And when you don't see that in yourself, it just gets kind of frustrating, and you're like, okay, but how am I supposed to like live my life when I'm not putting myself in relation to somebody else? If I'm not someone's love interest, if I'm not taking care of someone else, if I'm not pep talking someone else for their story, for them to be great, how do I be great myself? And I love fantasy because it's one of those things where when you create the world, it's like you can do whatever you want, and the world isn't limiting you to the roles that you have to actually deal with in real life. So you can be magical, or you can be a sword fighter, or you can be a princess or a queen or an assassin or whatever it is. And you can be, like you said, Stefanie, completely badass, and no one can tell you different. And you can move in spaces that aren't restricting you like you might have to in your normal life. And it gives you that confidence to be like, okay, this person was doing this, and I know it's a book, but still, I want to embody this type of confidence, this type of intelligence, this kind of strength. There are so many other aspects of it, and just seeing that as the protagonist and being inside that person's head as the main story, and not having to be like, oh, I know this story isn't about her, and she hasn't shown up for like 4 chapters, but still, she's probably doing this, or she's probably doing that, and like having to essentially write yourself into a story that's not told for you, and I feel like having that is so important.
Agree. Awesome. Thank you. And Holly, also same question.
Yeah. So just kind of picking up right where you left off and having to write yourself into the stories. That's exactly how I started writing. Is I loved all the sci-fi stories. I loved the action adventure stories, but I didn't want to be the one being saved. I wanted to be the one doing the saving and being the hero. And I couldn't find those stories. So fan fiction, back before I even knew what fan fiction was, for these stories and the TV shows that I liked, and writing in the character for me that I wanted to see and that I wanted to aspire to, and putting them in there and making them the hero, because I couldn't find it. And you need to see yourself and you need to see that. And I think, at least for me, and when I was growing up, I was given books like The Babysitter's Club and The Boxcar Children, and these were the girl books, and this is what you're supposed to be reading. And it made me hate reading because I didn't want those stories. That's not what I wanted. And it was always, well, you know, you shouldn't be playing Star Wars, or you shouldn't care about Star Trek, you're a girl. And I'm like, but that's what I love. So it was always kind of had to hide it in the background. And when I was writing fan fiction for a 90s show called Sequest, I don't know if anyone remembers that show, loved it.
Oh yeah.
I actually took that fan fiction and turned it into my main series and kind of gave these characters that I created my own world. But I wrote it with a friend of mine, and we would pass stories. We each wrote ourselves in as a character, as a female character in this military male world, but we had to hide it. We're printing them off and passing them to each other in between classes in manila folders so that no one would know that we were allowed to like this. It had to be a secret. And I'm sick and tired of it being a secret, because girls belong in fantasy and sci-fi. I mean, Frankenstein is considered one of the first science fiction books. It was written by a 19-year-old girl. So we're done saying that girls are just getting into this and they're just being, you know, becoming interested. We've always been interested, but maybe not always allowed to be interested. So now we're out and we're here, and we need to see more stories so that everyone can start accepting that.
Agree. Thank you so much. We've touched on this a little bit, but the next question is, what are some common pitfalls with female characters in science fiction fantasy? Samantha, why don't we start with you?
I think one of them is only having one definition of strength. Like, the idea of strong female character is out there beyond just writer speak, right? The whole world knows about strong female characters. But I think we're still seeing strong female characters means literally strong. Like, I can pick up a truck, or I can punch you and make you bleed. It's not that I don't love characters that can do that. I just think it's limiting if that's all we think a strong female character is, because there are many, many kinds of strength. And we lose out when we, you know, if my choices are that I can have a kick-ass woman, or I can have a doormat, then I'll take the kick-ass woman. No question. You know, I'm not complaining about those characters, but I want the full variety, the full gamut of all the different kinds of strong women that I see in my life represented in fiction. And sometimes the strength is emotional, or sometimes, you know, their strength is an incredible intellect, or their strength is in, you know, the more traditional roles that we're always being pushed into, the nurturing kinds of roles. That's real too. I just don't like it if that's all we see. So I think the biggest pitfall, the one that makes me mad, is just like, are the choices really only that I can be a paragon who can kick your ass, or I can be a doormat who doesn't matter to the story? Are those all my options? Because I don't like these.
Yeah, agree. Well said. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Holly, same question.
So I agree completely with the different kinds of strengths, and I've tried to write both. I have the strong military people or characters that fit more that definition of strong female characters. And then I have in my eco-terrorism story, Cleansing Rain, it's a scientist who's not physically strong, and she spends a lot of this book scared, but does it anyway. And that's a great kind of strength. But one of the big pitfalls that I see for female characters is, in a book, they're only one thing. You're only the warrior. You're only the mother. But why can't you be both? And I like to really write my characters with strength and femininity. And how do they work together? And, you know, maybe we're going into battle 1 minute, and then the next minute we're getting ready for a date when it's over. And you can do both, and you can be both and be more than one thing. And you don't just have to be the strong character. You can also, you know, like to get dressed up and be pretty and feminine, and those two things can exist together. And we don't see enough of that. We see a lot more one-dimensional female characters that aren't fully well-rounded on personality types. They're one thing. They're the smart one, the strong one, they're, you know, the pretty one. Why can't I be all three?
Mm-hmm.
Great point. I 100% agree with you. I have noticed that if you look at maybe some of the common pitfalls, they are definitely portrayed in those one-dimensional ways. Like they're the damsel in distress or the sexless scientist, right? Or the Black Widow, which is the object of sexual desire, right? That's what we will commonly see. So I agree with you. Like, can we just state for the record that they can be feminine and the funny one, right? Or they can be pretty and smart, right?
Absolutely.
Chelsea, how about you?
I agree with what all of you said. I think the common pitfall is just not allowing female characters to be more than one thing. And also this idea that in order for a female character to have value, she has to be naturally appealing in some type of way to the main character, and whether that be like a friendship way or a romantic way, but she has to be also be like conventionally pretty, because like you never get female characters who have like quote unquote been through anything, like especially if they are fighters, you know, they're fighters who've been through countless battles, but they don't have scars, or and they don't have muscles that could be intimidating. And you know, it's just like, even though they have these quote unquote masculine traits, they still have to be inherently super feminine. And even if they are super strong, they can't be stronger than anyone else in the book, and they still need to be saved at some point. And I think that's a common pitfall of just like this idea that they have to be quote unquote a second class citizen, essentially, in whatever story that they're being told. Like, even if they are the main character, is sometimes it's still, even though you're the main character, you know, you still have someone who has to swoop in and save you, whether that be physically or emotionally, or in like a very literal sense, like you're captured somewhere and someone has to come save you. I feel like that could be a pitfall. And also, like the thing that I say about myself in my writing is that I write Black girls who aren't all that nice. And the reason I say that is because, like, as a Black woman, I feel like sometimes female characters, especially Black characters, have to be super nice and super appealing so that they don't offend anyone. And I feel like that applies to all female characters. Like, we can't have opinions or strong opinions or be dissenting from the main character at all. Otherwise, it's just like, oh, she's just annoying. Oh, why is she even here? You know? And I feel like being able to write that is how you kind of avoid those pitfalls. Like, let them be people, let them make good decisions, bad decisions, have opinions, you know, disagree with someone, argue with someone, raise their voice, you know, break some things. You know, no one's perfect all the time. And this idea that you have to be the perfect little lady while also kicking ass, it's just kind of unrealistic, you know?
I get angry at that one too, at the whole like somehow female characters are supposed to stay likable, even if their job is something like, you know, tracking down criminals or being an assassin or all kinds, you know, being manipulative because they're a spy. Somehow they're still supposed to be likable. And we let male characters be anti-heroes, right? We let them be somebody that we can admire, even though they are mean, even though they are unnecessarily violent, even though they have to be dragged into the fight in the first place because they're a reluctant hero. And that's definitely part of why I wrote my series is, you know, I get tired of nice women. Because even nice women, you know, overall, I think I'm probably a nice woman. You have to ask other people, right? Overall, I think I'm probably a nice woman, but that's not all I am. And I'm not always nice. There are circumstances when nice does not serve you or anyone.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's also this extremity where it's just like, even if you do get that, you know, that detective character who's like by herself, it's like she has to completely shun men until she meets that one who's going to like reopen her whole life and open her heart and make her a nice person. And I feel like male characters get to sacrifice things that they don't want anymore. Like if they're like, no, I'm not opening myself up to relationships, even if they meet a romantic partner in their book, at the end of the book, they're still going to be like, okay, but I never said. They still have the option to not commit to that. Whereas I feel like with female characters, a lot of times they're written as, even if in the beginning she's this really like hardcore, I keep to myself, introverted person. By the end, she has to meet that standard of the perfect extroverted woman, of being nice and friendly. And even though she didn't want a family, she has to be open to it now. And she has to like not argue, and she has to, her demeanor has to completely change, even though that's not who she is. And I don't get with that. That's not my thing.
I love hearing about all this. And I love that we're hearing all these stories that you guys are putting out without that nice female character. Because I also have a character, Desi, in my underwater military series. And she is full of herself, and she is awesome, and she knows it, and she is not afraid to say it. And she will tell you what she thinks right to your face. And as I was first sending it out for agenting before I decided to go self-public, I was getting all this feedback. She's too catty. She's too harsh. She's too in your face. Why don't you change her from a Desi to a Dave? And then it will sit better with readers. And that was the moment I decided I was going to self-publish, because this is the story that we need. And we need more and more and more of them. And I'm so glad it's becoming more accepted. And there's more out there that we're, the females that are allowed to be proud of themselves and be like, yeah, I know I'm good. And that's okay, because as women, we're told we're not allowed to say we're the best. We're not allowed to acknowledge that we're good at what we do. And we have to be humble and feed others' egos without feeding our own. And I love that we're getting past that.
Yeah, I agree with you, because like one of my favorite lines to write into this book, We Are the Origin, is my main character. She's beautiful, and she knows that she's beautiful. And then there's a moment where someone else comes in and they're like, oh my God, you're really pretty. Like Mean Girls, channeling my inner Mean Girl. Like, oh my God, you're really pretty. She's like, yeah, I know. And the person's just like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, what did you think? I was supposed to be like, oh my God, thank you so much. No, I know I'm pretty. Get out of my way. You're bothering me. And I just loved writing that energy, because it's just like, yeah, no, there are definitely the narrative of some women where it's just like, yes, if you compliment me, I'm going to like fall all over you. If you tell me I'm pretty, I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. I appreciate that. But then there are also some women who are just like, yeah, I know you're in my way. Please get out of it. Appreciate it, and just being able to see both of that. Cause like, I know for me growing up, if I had seen that, it would have been like, oh, I do have the option to like not completely fall over myself at a compliment. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's another pitfall is the focus on appearance for female characters. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've all seen the like list of like badly written women written by men, right?
Yes.
But I also know, I've also read books written by women where I'll be like, a woman wrote this for reals. Mm-hmm. And I think a good exercise is often when you're describing a character, it just for a moment, gender flip it and imagine that you're describing a male character. Would you say those things about that character? Would those be the important details that you would mention? If I'm reading a Jack Reacher novel, how much detail do I get about his appearance? How much do I know about what he's wearing? Mm-hmm. How much do I know about what he does for his beauty routine, right? Mm-hmm. And depending on the kind of book you're writing, some of that detail might be actually really important to the story, who your character is and what they're doing. But a lot of times I feel like it's just there because it's a female character, and we substitute details about appearance for details about people, like Absolutely. Their actual inside person.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm still talking.
No, I was agreeing. I think what you said, Samantha, sort of reminded me of the Alien movie, where Sigourney Weaver stepped into a role that was written for a man, right? But her role still worked as a female. Her action, the horror of the movie, like the story, it rose above those gender norms or things that
it would not be as memorable if a man had played the role. Not at all. Like it was because it was a female character, and it made some of the plot holes work, because you're like, well, yeah, these guys didn't listen to her even though she knew what was going on, because she's a girl. Exactly. Yeah, we've all experienced that.
Sad but true.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about pitfalls. Why don't we flip it on its head and talk about, like, what are some good examples and what makes them good? Why don't we start with Holly?
Oh man. So I'm blanking on some specifics, but I look a lot to the YA genre for fantasy and dystopian and sci-fi and some of the newer books. Like if we look at The Hunger Games or Divergent or something like that, we're finally starting to see some of those more well-rounded female protagonists that aren't just there for a relationship and they're not a prop. So I think we need to look at newer writings that are coming out, because what you really want to do is you don't want to set out to be like, I'm trying to think how I want to say this, like I'm writing a female character. The female shouldn't be the part that matters. I'm writing a character who happens to be female and they are a full, well-rounded person. So we try and throw out some of those expectations and stereotypes. And I think what's great, thinking something like The Hunger Games, where they had male and female and they're throwing them into this intense situation, is there's no expectation necessarily that the men are going to do better than the female in this arena and in this fight, in this death match. And trying to write those stories where there isn't that ingrained sexism built into your world, where it's just accepted, where we don't have, you know, the strong female or the smart female as the exception to the rule. And we have to talk about it because it's special, because it doesn't happen often. And I love seeing stories where we can ignore that completely, where, you know, we can have in my books 2 female combat officers that are amazing at what they do. And it's never mentioned that they're female because it's accepted that they can, and this is the world. So that's kind of what I like to see. And I see it more in some of the young adult stories coming up than I do in some of more of the classic adult sci-fi.
Very true. Chelsea, how about you? Do you have some good examples you can share?
Actually, I do. So I have them laid out. So if you see me looking over here, I need you to know that I'm looking at the books on the table so I wouldn't forget.
You're more prepared than I was. I appreciate
that. But there are like 3 that come to my mind, and kind of like you said, Holly, I read a lot of YA just like naturally. I don't know. I was one of those weird kids where I read a bunch of adult when I was a teenager. Then I became an adult and I was like, let's go back to like YA. That sounds fun. But the 3 of the books that come to my mind are The Dread Nation and Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland. I loved Jane and Kate. That's one of the reasons why I love that series so much, because it's basically like an altered history type story with the zombies. So think Civil War, but zombies rose up. So that kind of put a nix on that. And then like the whole world kind of just fell apart. It's a fun story. But I really like the way that she wrote Jane and Kate, because they're very strong characters. And in this world, like these girls are going to these schools to learn how to fight zombies, to protect, you know, the very rich daughters of rich men, you know, and they're strong and they don't have perfect language, but they know how to flip between being a proper lady in a corset and carrying proper language and, you know, being seen and not heard, or neither, right? But they can also be like, okay, it's time to fight. I'm ripping my skirt up to the hem so I can move to get some movement, and I'm going to slice down some shamblers. And there's this really nice dynamic between their friendship, because I also feel like, kind of going back to pitfalls, when there is more than one female character, a lot of times they're pitted against each other. Like there can only be one who's the favorite. So I really like their friendship, and I think it's just done really, really well. The other one is Binti by Nydia Okorafor. I just absolutely love that book. It's like a series, a trilogy of short stories. And if you buy the whole collection, you get like an extra story, whatever. But I really love that, because it's like you have this girl who is leaving her home, and in the very, very first scene of the book, you have her breaking the social norms of her world or whatever, or her family and her society. And again, that's something that you don't really see a lot in fantasy, or at least you didn't before, where it's just like, I don't care what my dad thinks and my mom thinks and what people are telling me to do. I'm going to break these rules anyway, because this is best for me. And she has this whole adventure, and she's so intelligent. And I feel like And it's not just that she's the smart one. It's just like, she is intelligent. That is part of her character. And she uses it in the situations that she gets herself in. And it doesn't become her personality. It's just like, it's one of the things that augments her personality. And I feel like finding a balance between those two things and not making that all that she is amazing. And that also, like, all this crazy sci-fi stuff happens too. So that's also really dope. And the last book that I had in mind was The Kindred by Alicia Dow, which is a relatively new book. I want to say it came out either early this year or last year sometime. But again, it's one of those books where not only do you have a girl who from space, essentially an alien, right? But she's a plus size girl, and she's very nice. She's very sweet, and she has some of, the regular tropey things, but she's also confident in herself. She's also very kind, and she's also smarter than her male counterpart. And the balance between, because it's a romance, so the balance between the male and the female main characters is really nice, because it's like she's more than just his love interest, and she has moments where she's finding herself, and she's not dismissing herself and her needs in order to make him feel better, which I feel like is another pitfall that a lot of stories can fall into. All of those books are great. I've read all of them multiple times. So yeah, I came prepared for this question.
Yes. Shout out to our WriteHive guest of honor, Alicia Dow. Amazing story. I can double on that one. Yes.
Yes. She's amazing.
Samantha, how about you? Any recommendations?
So one of the first ones that came to my mind is actually a movie. It's Black Panther. And, I'm into superhero, you might have noticed, right? But the thing that makes Black Panther powerful so far as its portrayals of women, I think, is largely that it avoids that whole pyramid problem where we've got this group of very amazing people and a woman too, right? Because we've got at least 4 really strong women in that film, and they're not like each other. They're all strong in very different ways. It's not like we just have 4 members of the Dora Milaje, although that would be awesome too. I would watch that story. Okoye, Team Okoye.
Oh yeah.
But we've got the Queen, who's mostly there in her role as mother, but she's still very actively engaged. So many times the mother character in a story is just this little backgroundy thing. It's, my mother once told me, she doesn't matter now. It's all about what she did before we got to the now. And she's no longer an active character. And it didn't feel that way with, what was her name? Ramonda? I'll have to look up her name. But anyway, the Queen definitely was still very engaged. She was raising adult children and still very much being a mother and being active in all of the story and helping make all the decisions that led to everything that happened. And of course, you've got Okoye. And the thing I like best about her is not just that she's badass, and boy is she, right? Yeah. But that she also still has love in her life. Because so often when we get a really strong badass woman character, we act like that means she has to give up all the other aspects of her life. She can't have a love interest. She can't have a family. She can't have a pet cat unless we're going to kill it, to motivate her or something, right? And Okoye has a romance. She has a relationship in her life. She's got the sisterhood of the rest of the warriors, and she's got really great relationships with all the people she serves and protects in the royal family. And then you've got Shuri, who's, super smart, but she's not just super smart, right? She's also teases her big brother, and their relationship felt so real to me. And then even our love interest isn't there just as a love interest, right? She's also a social justice warrior. She wants to make the world a better place. And she's part of what helps T'Challa eventually be a really good king, is because of everything he learned from her. So I think that's, one great example. And the most important things about it is that we had a variety of women. Therefore, no one woman had to be the woman who represented everything, right? Because we had a variety of us, and, they were all different, all strong, all amazing, and all in one story. And you know what? The movie was still about Black Panther. They managed to fit all that in.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I add to that too? One of the things that I loved about Black Panther was Okoye's commitment to the throne, to the point where at the end when her husband was like, "You would kill me," and she was like, "For Wakanda," without question.
Yeah.
And it's just like the fact that she was allowed to have something more important to her, and she didn't have to like fall into that hierarchy. That, or I cannot remember her name, Lupita Nyong'o's character, I can't remember.
Nakia, I think.
Nakia.
Yes. She also was like, I've got bigger aspirations than just being your wife, than just being the queen. Like, I can't be a spy and the queen at the same time. So you're going to have to wait. And at the end, she was so she was about to leave too. And he was like, nah, stay this time, you know? So I wanted to add that in there too. Great movie.
I agree. Yeah, we could probably just do a panel on that, honestly.
We really could.
Yes, just a panel on Black Panther. Yeah.
Next year, book it for 2023. Well, I kind of did what Chelsea did. I went back and looked at my bookshelf to see like what recommendations I would give. And I had to go back to books that really drew me into the genre in the first place. I was a voracious reader of young adult, but I think I was in junior high when a friend of the family saw that I liked to read and gave me my first fantasy book. So it happened to be by a very prolific fantasy author, Patricia McKillop. She wrote a trilogy called The Riddle Master of Head, and that opened my eyes to the genre, period. But I was also hooked because the female character, she is a lead, just like the male lead. She's just as talented and just as powerful. And so that became a lifelong addiction to reading fantasy. That same person, that family friend, also introduced me to Anne McCaffrey. On the science fiction side, Anne McCaffrey has a series that started with The Rowan, and it moved on to Damia and Damia's Children. It was like a 5-book series that I remember distinctly haunting bookstores, like waiting for the next book in the series to come out, because I really was hooked on this whole idea of powerful telepathic women and the chain of succession that they had. So I know that we're all just, there are probably viewers watching this panel and they're groaning because their TBR list has just grown exponentially, but you're welcome.
Yeah, I had other examples on my list, but I figured I talked long enough about the movie. So
we'll put them on the chat. We'll just link all of the good examples in the chat, and that way we can help everyone. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. How do the speculative elements of these genres help further women's rights? Let's start with Chelsea.
Okay. I feel like it's one of those things where when you have a female character and she is written well and is a whole person, and you take off some of the limitations that we have to live with in day-to-day life, and you paint this picture of this is what we're capable of, this is what we can do when we're not forced to be, this one thing, or to be, nice and pretty and proper and speak nice and, make sure that we're modest, but, not too modest so that we're prude. And we have to fit into this constantly sliding scale of what femininity and women should look like, be like, sound like, act like, prioritize, etc. When you take those limitations off and you allow them to just be, and you write stories where they're allowed to just be, you kind of open your mind to the possibility of like, okay, but what if we did that in like real life? What if instead of having to sit here with a skirt down to my ankles, I was actually allowed to wear pants and move around and be comfortable? Do you know how powerful I would be? And, I'm only 27, so I don't know if that's how the conversation actually went or not. I just remember at one point I saw on the internet, like, the first time that women wore shorts out in public, it literally caused a traffic accident because people were driving off the road looking at them. And it's just like, now that's not a big thing for us. All of us wear shorts, but just the idea of, if I can do this in a fantasy story, then I feel like that opens the door for, okay, but we could do this in real life too. Maybe I can't summon, the entire power of the sun with a snap of my fingers or just my mind, but I can for sure be a leader of a group of people, and I can definitely use my voice to be heard. And even if I can't summon the power of the sun, what I'm saying is worth hearing. My ideas are worth listening to, and I can convey them in a way that would help actually help what we're trying to do. Kind of like what you said with the movie Alien. It's just like people didn't want to listen. And if they had, I'm sure there are a lot of people who would have been alive, just throwing it out there.
They wouldn't have an alien in their belly, would they?
Yeah, So I think that's how it helps. Just like it opens the door to be like, this is what it could be if you stopped putting limitations and expectations that women didn't ask for on them. Because, it's like we kind of go above and beyond even with those expectations on us. So imagine what we could do if we didn't have them,
Mm-hmm. Great point. Thank you. Holly, same question.
Yeah. So just to kind of keep building on what Chelsea said, because it's absolutely that, and building these worlds. But I also think writing genre fiction, especially sci-fi and fantasy, and the speculative nature of it allows us to approach some of these really complicated, hard to talk about topics like sexism and racism in a safer, more approachable way. Because if you're talking about, gender inequality between two alien species, I'm not calling you out on saying, no, you're a human and you're a man and you're doing this. I'm saying in this made up world, we have this, and you can relate it back through the story, and you can tell and talk about some of these topics without getting everybody's guard up right away, and kind of trick them into thinking about and addressing, difficult conversations by giving them that distance that speculative fiction and sci-fi and fantasy inherently has. I mean, if we're talking, whether it's discrimination between alien races or genders or, whatever, we can do that through fantasy, orcs and fairies. And I'm like, well, I'm not a fairy, but maybe I can apply this or something like that. And it gives us that space to really do some self-examination and really think about things that maybe we shy away from as society because it's not polite to talk about and we don't want to offend anyone. And genre fiction lets us confront it in the face in a safe way.
Good point. Thank you, Holly. Samantha, how about you?
Well, Holly hit on one of my favorite ways to think about speculative fiction, that, I think people actually learn best when they don't think they're being taught, right? When they're playing, when they're just enjoying something, when they have an experience and they go on a ride and they're like, that was awesome. And then, the subconscious is a wonderful thing. Sometimes a little seed has been planted there and it grows in a way that changes your life. And speculative fiction is a great opportunity for that because, we read speculative fiction in part because it is fun, right? Because you get to experience things that are impossible. People can't actually fly without machinery, right? But boy, is it fun to read about what it would be like to be able to fly without machinery, just with your own body. And so when you're in that fun mode, you're actually more open to considering things and to learning. And so if you're a writer with an axe to grind, may I recommend that you skew away from literary fiction where you're going to come across as pedantic and annoying, and instead go have some fun over here with us in speculative fiction, where people will think they're just going for a ride with you, but they may accidentally learn something too. And speculative fiction is all about what if, right? And sometimes the what if is, what if it didn't matter what color my skin is? And sometimes is, what if I could throw fire with my brain, right?
I love that answer. Just to build on what you're saying, Samantha, I totally agree. When you look at speculative fiction, it's an opportunity where you can imagine a future that, and like what humanity's role may be in that future. And it may or may not happen, but I'm assuming there could be women in that future. So speculative fiction gives you an opportunity to imagine and have conversations about what those roles could look like and what women might be doing in the future, or, what their priorities may be, or maybe even just how they can make it a better place. Who knows? There are so many options there. And I love what you said about having that opportunity to imagine that and learn about what that could look like without feeling like, you know, someone's being pedantic about it. I love that. So our next question is, what tropes are you sick of, and what tropes would you like to see more often? I think that we have touched on this just a little bit, but I'd like to really do maybe like a deeper dive on this. So why don't we start with, we'll stay with you, Samantha.
All right. So there's a bunch of different tropes I don't like, of course. I mean, I wrote an entire series because I didn't like a lot of tropes of the way women are treated in superhero fiction. But the one I'll bring up first today is she's not like the other girls. That one is so all over young adult fiction, that like somehow this one girl is okay because she's not like the other girls. And usually that means that she's somehow startlingly beautiful, even though she puts no effort into being startlingly beautiful. She barely showers, but somehow she's still a supermodel, right? And or she's not like other girls because she doesn't care about the things that you think the girls are supposed to care about. And I think it's just an ugly trope because it pits women against women. You know, I am a woman who doesn't spend a lot of time on her appearance. I am wearing earrings today, right? Because I was trying to cosplay a grown-up for this panel. You know, I'm not a woman who wears makeup or focuses a lot on my clothing and stuff, but that doesn't mean that women who do are somehow not as good as me or something like that, right? You know, it's just, I don't have that particular interest. Other women do. Some women can do amazing things with their makeup. I'm like, dang, that's amazing. So I think that the heart of why I hate it is that it pits women against other women. It's very judgy and suggests that a woman character, especially when it shows up in young adult literature, it seems to suggest that a female character can only be an interesting character if she is not at all traditionally feminine.
Very interesting. I think they call that the pick me girls. Pick me. Yeah, good point. Yeah. How about you, Chelsea?
Kind of in the same vein, my biggest one is like there could only be one of us, and it's not necessarily she's not like other girls, I would say, but like there can only be one girl that's smart. There can only be one girl that's really pretty. There can only, and if there's more than one, it's just like they have to be like at each other's throat. It has to be like a frenemy type situation and not them actually supporting each other. Or they're like, she doesn't have other female friends, or she doesn't know how to get along with people, or it's like, no, there can only just kind of, and this is such a weird, and I don't know if we're allowed to talk about it anymore, but kind of like how Hermione was in Harry Potter. It's like she had to be the smartest. She had to be the one. And I don't like that trope because it's just like, as we can see, like we're a whole panel of women, right? Like we interact with each other, and most of the time we're uplifting each other, and we're in this battle together. So the idea that in fantasy there can only be one who's smart, one who's pretty, one who's strong, one who can do all of the things, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't vibe with it. It can go and never come back.
We're all cheering silently. Yeah, sort of like I hear what you're saying, and I totally agree. I was sort of thinking along the same lines because I am sort of sick of the trope of like the tank, the ancient wizard, and the ingenue walk into a bar. Like we've seen that trope. It's been done. I want to see like the dumbass and the trickster walk into a bar. Like that's what I want to see. Like, let's have more of that, right? How about for you, Holly?
So I'm going to make it 4 for 4 on the only can be one and the it girl thing. I hate it. We need, the trope I want is female friendships, and real female friendships that aren't just, oh, let me get, I'm going to help you win the guy or whatever. I mean, that's great. And we do support each other like in that way as well in romantic endeavors, but I want real friendships. There's a quote or a meme that I've seen, and I love it so much. And it's be the woman that fixes someone else's crown without telling the world it was crooked in the first place. Mm-hmm. So how do we lift and support other women and lift each other up without saying, oh yeah, I saved her, I'm better than her, she needed me. Like, mm-hmm. Let's just support each other. And then another trope that I don't like for women, and maybe it's because of who I am personally, is the over emotional woman, the one that's always crying and that has all these feelings, and women have feelings and men don't. And let me tell you, I'm an introvert. I am a very technical, logical person. I don't like to acknowledge that I have feelings. I think they're gross and they're best left for, in the bathroom with the lights off in the dark and nobody knows. Like, I'm not an outwardly expressive, emotional person. My husband, on the other hand, he's the romantic one. He's the sentimental one. And, it's Valentine's Day and I'm at, the gas station trying to get a card on my way home from work before dinner. And he's written me a novel and a card. So that type of dynamic can change. And I hate that we never see the emotional male and the stoic female character. So I really try to work those kind of subverting gender expectation kind of things into my writing, because that's who I am. I mean, I work in a male dominated field. I fit in there. That's where I am. I don't like to have feelings. Those are, for me, they're private. I don't like to express them, but I don't ever see female characters holding back the tears unless it's like, oh, I'm going to triumph through this and I'm being beat up. Like, I just don't want to acknowledge feelings. We don't see characters with that and work through some of that stoic female character, unless they're the old grandmother or the wizard or, something like that.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Yes.
Because I 100% agree. Like, I would love to get a book where there's a female character who doesn't cry. It's, to me, I'm like, if it's not adding to the story, like, I'm so glad that you have emotions, but like, we have to have like a breakdown crying scene, especially when it's the thing that like motivates the main character. I'm like, why is her crying got to be the thing that finally gets you off of your ass to do what you need to do? I don't know. That's kind of weird, bro. Yeah. But that, and I also want to add to what I said earlier, the trope of she doesn't know she's pretty. And I hate that trope so much, because it's just like, I don't know about you guys, and I know that this is like a real thing, but like a lot of times, like, you don't get to like almost adulthood and have no concept of how you rank in the system of other people, like physically.
Not if you have any brains.
Yeah. And it's just like, unless you are like, it's one of those things where you're like truly like abused and you're just like, no, you're ugly, you're stupid, and you're told that on a regular basis. If you're just like a regular person with no type of like trauma, you're not going to make it to 14, 15, 16 beyond and not realize that, oh, I'm kind of cute. Oh, I have these features that people find like visually pleasing. And the whole like, oh, you're really pretty. Oh, am I? I'm really not that pretty. But like the false humbleness, I'm not down for it. That can also leave with, there can only be one. They can leave together and be friends out in the void, because I'm not here for it.
I've got one more to toss in here. Why is it that everybody is under 30 or over 60? Yes. Like, what happened to those years in the middle? They can't figure out what to do with a woman if she's not young and inexperienced, or has already experienced everything, right? So those invisible years in between are kind of the focus of where I write, because that's what the quote, right, from Toni Morrison: if there's a book you want to read and it hasn't been written, you must write it. Yeah, that's why.
Exactly.
I just did, for a different conference, a whole panel on mothers and mature women in sci-fi and fantasy, and we talked about that a lot, and how women disappear in those ages, from when they leave their 20s until they're a grandmother. They disappear because they're the caretaker, and that's their whole role, and that's our role in society. And so we need more stories to break that. I hate that, the mother is in the background. And let's just talk about another trope. Why do the moms always have to die to motivate the main character in sci-fi and fantasy? Like, I'm a sucker for the orphan trope. Also, it's really hard for me to make sure that my characters aren't always orphans, because writing families comes with a lot of backgrounds you got to work in. And being an orphan and losing parents, great motivation to go out on that quest. But maybe we need to start rethinking that.
So sorry. That was my dogs.
The mom always, you know, why do we always kill the moms or leave them in the background? And why can't we bring them forward? Let's have more moms and older single childless women in sci-fi fantasy.
And why are moms either paragons of motherhood or crap mothers?
Right.
Most mothers are somewhere in between, really good at some part of the job and not so great at other parts of the job. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I would love to see more parents in young adult novels who like actually care about their children, and they're like, I know where you're at. I realize that you have to go out here and save the world, but you also need to do your math homework. You know, like I would love to see a balance, because I watch a lot of anime. I don't know if you guys watch anime or not, but there's like this whole idea that parents don't exist. Like you just come into being at 16. That's just what happened.
Yeah.
And so I would just love to see more of an adult presence, and also kind of like what you said, just like younger women, because one of the things that I get frustrated with is like because I'm in my 20s or whatever. I would love to see stories with protagonists with people in their 20s who aren't like, oh, I'm trying to get a house. Oh, I'm trying to like get married. Oh, I'm trying to do this. Or, oh, I need to have kids because like you're 25. What? Huh? No. Like, and admittedly, I am probably not the person, because I got married really young. I got married at 20, but still at the same time, like all of my friends, they're like, where do we exist in this timeline? Because like adult like stories usually start at like 30 plus. And then you have young adult, which really only goes up to like 16, 17. And then the age range between like 18 and 30 just kind of disappears. It's just not like a genre. Like young adult is for the teenagers, and adult usually starts for like I said, 30 plus. Like you got a house, you got bills, you got responsibilities. And when you're in your 20s, you're not there yet, you know? So I would like to see more of that. I don't know where that idea came from. If I threw us off, I apologize. It was very appropriate.
No, it's a great idea
to share it.
I think what we've just stumbled on is, you know, more panels that we need to create, right? So we'll add that to the list, definitely. So I think it was a very good point about like, if you don't feel the story exists, then you should write it. So sort of along that lines, why don't we go around the room, and if we could ask each of you to talk about your book and examples of why you depicted the women in your world the way that you did. And why don't we stay with Chelsea, actually?
I get to go first. Okay. So my book, We Are the Origin, is about a group of assassins who have to save the gods in their realm from destruction. And the main character, her name is Brandy. She's the one at the bottom, this one. And I wrote her as she's an assassin. So I guess content warning for my book, there is a lot of graphic violence because she's an assassin. And one of the things that I wanted to write in my book is just like, I've seen books where it's like, oh yeah, I'm an assassin, or I do this, and you never actually see them do the job that they say that they're supposed to do. And I'm like, no, she's an assassin, so she kills people. Just throwing that out there. That's not your bag. But I wrote her as like super confident, and like I said, she knows she's pretty. She knows she's the best at what she does, and she moves with a confidence where she's not looking for approval, and she's not looking for, oh, like, am I doing this okay? Like, nah. I did this. I'm telling you what to do because you're in my way and I need you to get out of it, you know? And for me, it was so important to write her that way, because when I was like 16, 17 ish, it was just like, I didn't have that confidence to know to move in a way where I was confident, even though like I knew I was smart. I knew I was funny. I knew I was intelligent, but I was this idea of like false humbleness was so ingrained into me. It was just like, I could not accept it. So this is technically new adult. I don't know how people feel about that title, but the characters in my books are 21 and up. So it's not young adult, but I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to write her as a young 20-year-old who's just like confident in who she is and proud of it. And she's not nice. And I feel like that's another one of the things that we mentioned. I wanted to make sure that she's 100% the person who will happily throw you out of a moving ship instead of like dealing with you. That's just who she is. You know, death is option number one working through things is option number 2, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the other characters in the book, there's also the gods. There's a 5-god system, and there's 1 goddess and 4 other gods. I want to write a reverse harem because I watch a lot of anime and I thought it would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
But also I feel like it's one of those things where we as a culture, we see women as if you casually date, or if you're not just locked down to one person, you're seen as less valuable. And I just kind of want to write a story where it's like, no, it's quite the opposite. Like, this is a matriarchal society. So it's the goddess, she's got 4 different lovers. The queen has multiple lovers. That's how she runs her court, you know, and it's very common, and they have the most value in the world, you know. And it was so important to me to write that, because it's just like, your value is not connected to how many people you sleep with, you know, and your ability to lead is not connected to like how many people you've slept with or what type of person, you know. It's all about the type of person that you are, you know. But there's also another character, a female character, her name is Sarah, who kind of goes along this journey with my main character, Brandy. And she's a complete opposite. She's very sheltered. She's very like not as confident as the others, but she kind of comes into it, and there are places in her life where she's confident. Like, she knows that she's helpful. She knows that she's a good healer. She knows that she is a good older sister. But then there are other places where she's less confident, and she kind of is what I like to call well-rounded. Like, she's not a complete shut-in where she's just like, oh no, what's going to happen? I'm so scared. But she's also not like, yay, let's go kill people. You know, she's in between. And I don't know, it was fun being able to write all of those different characters. And there are other characters that I'm not going to talk about, because I could talk about my book all day. I'm an author. I like talking about myself. So, but that's kind of what was important to me, just to be able to show that duality and not being the things in our society that are usually held against women. Like, also Brandy is a dark-skinned girl. She's the darkest character in the book. That's intentional, but she still moves with confidence and like, I'm beautiful, because a lot of times dark-skinned girls are told that they have lesser value. They're not as pretty and they don't fit this standard of beauty. And I didn't want to write that into my book. That's not something that any of my characters deal with. Like, because of my skin color, I'm not beautiful. So yeah, that's my spiel. I'm gonna stop talking, otherwise I will continue. But
Thank you, Chelsea. That sounds amazing. I want to read it.
Yay, thank you. Comes out June 21st.
Ready. I'm ready. Let's move to Holly. Holly, will you tell us about your work?
Absolutely. So first, in my underwater military series, Crystal and Flint, it's told in dual point of view from 2 female characters. And like I think I mentioned earlier, I created the 2 main characters, Crystal and Flint, or Desi, with a friend of mine when we were writing science fiction for the 90s show Sequest. And we wrote ourselves into the story. And I didn't want to stop writing those stories, but I wanted to take, so I took those characters and I gave them their own world. And what I really was trying to do with them, especially Crystal, because she's more the character that I created. And when I created her as a teenager, she was strong, she was beautiful, she was intelligent, she was flawless. And because that's what I needed, because I didn't have that confidence. I didn't feel like I was any of those things as a teenager. So this projection of myself that I wrote into these stories was absolutely perfect, never failed at anything, because I thought that's what I had to be. And the ideal that that I had to strive to reach. And so when I kind of pulled them out of that story later, when I was in college and picking these characters up again, I really wanted to look at, you know, what flaws would she have from having those expectations she placed on herself, similar to what I did, because you can't have a character without flaws. You're not going to have anything to tell in the story if everything goes right. So kind of looking at that, you know, the exterior versus the interior, and she may portray herself as a strong, confident soldier and highly respected and really advanced, but why? And where's the flaws in there? And I kind of, it was one of those moments that things just kind of work together. I always like the idea of her having a feminine name with a strong trait and a physical presence. So her name is Crystal. But then when you look at it, crystals are perfect on the outside and typically have a flaw on the inside on the molecular level where things don't line up quite right. So that kind of became perfect for her. Whereas the other character, Desi Flint, is really outgoing and really in your face and really confident. And her journey was kind of to humble and see that, you know, maybe I'm not the best at everything and that's okay. And I still have room to learn. And I liked, again, this was purely coincidence, but when I sat down to look at it, flint is another geological thing, a stone similar to crystal, and it's chaos and it sparks, you know, you can make sparks with it. And that very much fits her personality. So when I was creating them, I really wanted to try and subvert some of those gender stereotypes. And another way I did that was with their male counterparts in these stories and giving them what people think of as traditional female traits, making them the more emotional ones. They're the supportive ones. They're the caretakers to these other two. And trying, because I have male friends that are like that, and showing that portrayal of what it means to be a man against this strong woman, I think is just as important. In my other series, Cleansing Rain, the main character is Zoe, and she's a scientist. And what I wanted to do with her was to show strength in a different way, which I think Samantha talked about. And she has this really quiet inner strength, and she's pulled into this conspiracy theory about the end of the world in an eco-terrorism group run by her fiance's family. And she has to continuously make the decision to keep going and keep digging and keep looking for the truth, no matter how scared she is, no matter how easy it would be to just sit back and go on with her life as it is. Because she was happy and she was engaged and she had a dream job and she was, you know, had everything she wanted. And to continually have to step up when you're scared, and to be a leader when you're scared and you're not used to the spotlight and you don't want the spotlight, and different types of leadership that aren't necessarily that outgoing in your face person. And can you have a quiet inner strength and a quiet leadership that draws people to you? So that was really different than Crystal and Desi. So that's also has been really fun to kind of balance those two different stories and those two different versions of strengths.
Awesome. I love that. That's what I want to read. Love it. Samantha, how about you? Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. So my series is the Menopausal Superhero series, available from Falstaff Books. And it started because I have always been a fan of superheroes. Like I've read comic books, watched every superhero program my whole life. I love superheroes. But as I got older, it became a little harder to connect to a lot of superhero stories because the characters are always so young, so very young, and often like actually going through puberty young. And so my husband and I had just watched one of the X-Men movies. And honestly, I don't remember which X-Men movie it was. But we were walking around talking about it afterwards. And I was like, you know, the secret message of this movie is that puberty causes superpowers. And he laughed. You know, it's like, yeah, you're kind of right. And I was like, so if hormones cause superpowers, then menopausal women should have the corner on that market. And that was kind of the little joke at the heart that got me started. But as I started to write the books, I found that they were they are funny, but they're not just comedies. I describe the tone as dramedy, and there's so much about female friendship. I really wanted a diverse group of women. So we've got a lot of different walks of life. We've got, somebody who's a grandmother. We've got somebody, the youngest woman in the series is Jessica, who gets fly powers and becomes Fly Girl. She's a young woman, and she was dealing with depression because she was going through cancer treatments. And so she's gone through menopause at like age 32 because of cancer. Right. And then you've got more typical age women going through, in their later 40s, in their 50s, one that was annoyed because she still wasn't menopausal and she was 60, and she was like, when will this stop? So I played with kind of menopausal complaints turned into powers. So like one of the women was experiencing hot flashes, so they became very literal, and she became able to wield fire Another woman had dry, itchy skin that eventually became fully armored flesh, and she's now bulletproof as the lizard woman of Springfield. So that's the kind of things I've played with there. And all these women whose different choices in life have made them very different from each other, brought together because of suddenly developing superpowers, and then the friendships that develop among them. And sometimes the people you think would have been a good fit to be friends just brush off of each other. And these two people who seem like they're very opposite each other actually are great friends. And just like my real group of friends, there's such a range in age, that in a lot of works, I feel like either everybody's 40 or everybody's 20. We're all about groups of people that are all around the same age, but that's not what I experience in my life. The women who surround me range from, teenagers through great grandmothers, and all of them teach and learn from each other. So it's, that's the kind of female friendship and female relationships I'm looking to capture in the series.
I love that. I'm so excited to be on this panel. I'm gonna, I want to be besties with all three of you, if that's cool. So just to talk a little bit about my series, The Merry Maids is a science fiction trilogy. It's complete. The female main character has lived, what I would call a self-isolated life. She wanted to learn her skills in telekinesis and movement, and so she really didn't put herself out there. The series opens with her receiving her first work assignment. She's going to a small ship crew, and she's got to figure out where does she fit in now. So there were a few things that I wanted to depict in the story. The female main character, she's got a female captain. Her captain is sort of lovingly inspired by Captain Janeway from Star Trek Voyager. She's very smart, very capable. She's the main character's respected mentor type of a role. But despite that, she's not matronly, right? She's not the crone of the story. She is somebody that has a very full and well-rounded life, though she may or may not be in about her 40s, right? So that was something I wanted to make sure that I depicted. I didn't necessarily specifically call out things like race in the book, but if you read the descriptions, or I made those TikToks that say, this is how I see my character, you get the sense that the characters in the story are all very racially diverse. They come from different backgrounds, different lifestyles, and that was something that was really important. And then I would say the third thing that I wanted to showcase is that the female main character, she's not a Mary Sue. Right? She is not the chosen one. She's not the destined, prophesied person. She gets hurt, she suffers, she ends up building a found family in the story with her crew, and together they kind of save the day. So those are all the elements that I really worked toward creating in the Merry Maids trilogy, and that we're really focused on. I think that now, after having sat through our panel, I now know kind of some of the things that I want to take into my future work. So I appreciate all of you and the input that you've provided.
Well, thank you for having us. This has been fun.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sadly, we are at the end of the panel, so I would like to thank all of our panelists for talking with us today about how much depiction matters. We will stay in the chat a little bit longer to continue answering questions for our WriteHive 2022 attendees. But to wrap up, why don't we go around the room and briefly let our viewers know what projects you would like to plug and how to find you after the conference. So why don't we start with you, Holly?
Sure. So I have the sequel to Cleansing Rain. It's called Crashing Tide. It'll be out in September. So make sure you're ready for that. And if you want to find me on Instagram and Facebook, I am at Holly Ash Writer. On Twitter, where I don't spend as much time, but I do check it regularly, I am at Holly Ash 85. And you can find out more information about all the events I do and all my books on my website, which is hollyashwriter.com.
Thank you, Holly. Samantha?
Hello, I am Samantha Bryant, and you can find me at samanthabryant.com, which will also give you links to all the social media. I hang out the most on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Samantha B Writer, just the letter B in the middle. And you'll get pictures of my dogs and my walks in the woods, as well as stuff about superheroes and writing, and maybe a little complaining about my teenager.
Sounds good. Chelsea?
Okay. I am Chelsea, but I go by CM Lockhart, and you can find me on Twitter and TikTok at CLockhartWrite. I exist on Instagram, but I don't spend a lot of time there. And my website is Written in Melanin. So if you want to get We Are the Origin, which comes out on June 21st, if I could talk, or my other book, Keeping Promises, those are both available on my website. And if you want, I also host a live stream on YouTube Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's called The Melanin Chat, where me and another author who runs a podcast called Between the Reads, we get together and we talk about all things related to bookish and writerly things. So it's a fun time.
Awesome. Thank you. As for me, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter under Latina Geek Girl. Or you can visit my website, which is latinageekgirl.com. The Merry Maids trilogy is complete and it's available on Amazon. I'll be finishing my Latinx superhero story later this year, as well as Dia de los Muertos short story that will come out in an anthology that's hitting this autumn, I believe. So that wraps up our panel. On behalf of Chelsea, Holly, and Samantha, thank you so much for watching. We can't wait to see you on the WriteHive Discord, and we look forward to any additional questions you might have for us. Thanks for joining.